What if your anxiousness and struggle is signaling that there is untapped creativity within you? Creativity has the power to heal, and today's guest is going to share how to tap into your creative power. Welcome to this episode of She Made It. I am your host, Elle Zimmerman, and I am joined by my co-host, Clara.
Hi,
Hey, Clara.
I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, we have had a busy couple months. We've been producing a masterclass series on Zoom. That's been really fun, hasn't it?
It has been. We've been doing it monthly, and instead of the live events, which we were doing before COVID, it's given us a really cool way to connect with more people. And you've been talking about the Enneagram, which has been so fascinating. I feel like we've all learned so much.
Yeah, the Enneagram is like my new thing. One of the blessings of the pandemic is, I think a lot of people sort of looked inside and started doing development or going back to passions. And I've always loved the Enneagram. So I really took the opportunity to dig deeper, and I've been working towards certification. So that's been super fun. And then sharing that on the masterclass. And I just love how the Enneagram opens up so much opportunity for self-awareness, for growth. And actually part of the process of the masterclass and tying in the Enneagram, we had this great one beginning of the year about creating a meaningful vision. And it really is relevant any time of the year. And so, Claire, why don't you share a little bit about what we've sort of been making behind the scenes?
Yeah, so we've created these free resources that we're so excited to share with you, our podcast listeners. So this one that we want to share with you today is called Create a Meaningful Vision. It's Elle's process for honing in on what you want, what went well in the last year, what didn't go well, to really create a life that feels like you, which is our whole mission on She Made It. So if you want to access that, you can go to ellzimmerman.com/downloads. And the exciting thing is that once you enter in your information to download that, you'll also be on the list to get updates about Elle's masterclasses. So it's a win-win, and there's just lots going on here and lots of things that we're so excited to share with you for free.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on that, the master classes are free as well. And they're just a 1 hour over lunch to connect with me, to connect with other like-minded people who really want to grow.
Yeah, it's been a blast. And speaking of people who want to grow and who have stepped into their power, I know that today's episode is someone who has done that in a really amazing way.
Yeah, Martha Uke. I met her a couple years ago at a creativity conference, and she's so inspirational. She has great information how to combine like different areas of your life to have what feels like a more whole, balanced life, sort of a more authentic version of you.
So for a little background on Martha, Martha Uke was born and raised in Venezuela, and she has over a decade of experience working as an architect on projects around the globe. In 2015, she graduated as a certified yoga teacher, and currently she is exploring new ways to share the benefits of creativity and design approach with others through art, yoga, and her ongoing workshop, The Art of Cultivating Joy. Martha is also an advocate for mental health, which she champions through her newest venture, Little Raging Warrior Project. Stay tuned for Elle's conversation with Martha Uke.
So welcome, Martha.
Hi, Elle. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. And so, Martha, where are you recording in from today?
Well, I am based out of Jacksonville, Florida.
So you have some nice warm weather all year round.
Yes, I can't complain. I mean, it does get cold here in the winter, but never compared to any other place.
Sure. And you are originally from Venezuela, correct? So Florida might actually be a little chilly compared.
Anything below 70 degrees is chilly for me.
Yeah, so I'm really anxious to kind of dig in. I know that you, when we spoke, you shared with me that you label yourself, call yourself, identify yourself as an architect, a creative, and a yogi. And I would love to sort of hear a little bit about how architecture sort of frames everything for you. You sort of said you sort of enter into creativity through the lens of architecture because of the combination of science and art. And so maybe give us sort of a little peek into the journey and how your creative journey started first with architecture.
Absolutely. Great question. And I love it. So architecture is a career I went to college for. And to be honest, even when I started working, a few years passed and I really didn't consider myself creative because I was just, following the design process and doing these things that my job requires. But I never identified myself as a creative person. And but the other side of the thing is that everything I do, I'm really doing it from the architect in me, the way I come into a space, I look at the space, what the materials are, the height, how does it feel and whatnot. So a few years ago, I had this almost like an epiphany. I was going through a rough patch because I had like a health crisis, and I was doing this project that was really, really challenging, but I loved design. It was one of the first times I was the lead designer on a project. And we kept having challenges, but we were always able to resolve it. And I was always able to keep the integrity of the design or the concept that we had initially. And the light bulb went on in my head. And I'm like, wait a minute. If I can, through iteration, always keep the integrity of this design, what happens when I apply this methodology to myself? What happens when I treat myself as a client and as the most important thing that I need to resolve as a design? And I kind of started going into that rabbit hole. And I'm also, like you say, I'm also very curious. And I was reading a book. It was a biography, and they quote William Plummer, and he's a novelist, and on his concept on creativity, and I got hooked. The quote was, "Creativity is the power to connect the seemingly unconnected." And when I read that, I got chills in my body, and I'm like,
Mm.
"Wait a minute! I've been creative all my life. Like this is problem solving." So it really just opened up a window of possibilities for me to take my design process and apply it to my own mental health.
And I love the connected to the unconnected.
Mm-hmm.
Because part of your story, because in reading and in chatting with you before, I know that you were a yogi, you studied yoga. Tell me a little bit about that journey, because I remember reading something about the connection to your body led to almost more sickness from your body.
Yeah. So I was in this, it was also a few years ago, I was in this yoga class. I had kind of like a love-hate relationship with yoga, that I would go, but it was like torturing me, but I knew I'd feel good afterwards. So,
Yeah,
but
don't
one
we
day,
all?
oh man, yeah. So I was on the mat and this teacher is talking about like, well, one of the things that yoga is about is to learn to be in discomfort. You're not supposed to be doing one of the asanas or poses and just be like chilling. Like that's not what this is about. It's about to learning to be in discomfort, because when you observe that, you learn things about yourself. And that's the journey of yoga, to become one in mind, body, and spirit. And I was like, oh, okay, tell me more. So it really opened up this possibility of start observing me and from a non-judgmental point of view. And I really realized how disconnected I was from my own body. And it came from trauma. Like I experienced child sexual abuse, and that caused a trauma that was never addressed. And when I was in my early 30s, I started having all these flashbacks, and it was just like, it was the flashbacks. I got really sick. I had chronic fatigue and all these things. But the one thing that would help me, at least for that hour and a half, connect and be not still, but less anxious would be yoga.
Mm.
So all the things that I learned from it, like no, like the do no harm, ahimsa, and it's like that means no violence. And violence can be expressed in so many ways. And when we criticize ourselves, like how are you talking to yourself, can be very, very violent when we have that inner critic in full mode. So I was like, okay, so I need to tone down that. And, like there were all these little things that started to make sense. And the breathing was so impactful on me. Like I learned that when I'm anxious and when I'm really stressed, like I can't really breathe. And that's telling my body that I am in danger. So it's just like a snowball. And when I'm in that mode, you would know it as well. Like there's no creativity possible. When you're in survival mode, there's no space to connect that's seemingly unconnected. So yoga opened for me a space to observe and as basically a space to just starting to discover who I am.
I love that. I will tell you that I have a similar story. I did not have that sort of childhood trauma, and I'm sorry that that happened to you. And I'm grateful that you found a way to process that because, that trapped emotion doesn't go away until we deal with it. And so, yeah, so gratitude for that. But I'll share just a little bit of my journey with yoga. So I was a dancer and actress, and so movement was very important to me. And so I think I was also disconnected, but I feel that for me, I noticed it through emotional disconnection. I've talked about this before, that there would be commercials on TV that I knew were supposed to be evoking sentimentality or an emotional response, and I would have nothing. And I would even remember thinking, what is wrong with me? Why am I not feeling anything? And, I had my own reasons why that was happening, a lot of codependency and a lot of over responsibility for others. But yin yoga for me, because I'm a very busy person, a very active person, I like to work out really hard. So yin yoga for me was where I think I cried for 2 years on the yoga mat when I did yin yoga because of the release. And I still have really, really tight hips that I know are just that's where I store the emotion. But it was life-saving for me in that my emotional life could come alive through the practice of stopping, being still, stretching, and being very uncomfortable with it.
Right?
Yeah, yeah. But now you are you went through teacher training as well, correct?
Yes, yes. I did the 200-hour teacher training, and I did it not only out of curiosity to go deeper into the yoga journey, but also to learn how to, create to have a practice of my own that wouldn't depend on having a teacher available. Because like you in my work as an architect, like I work long hours, like we have deadlines all the time. So I cannot always make it to the hour and a half practice. But I've discovered that if I stop and I do yoga for 20, 30 minutes, it really helps. Like, and it takes out the pressure of like, oh, I did not do my practice. It's just like, okay, I won't do an hour and a half. I'm going to do 20 minutes, but those 20 minutes are golden.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and so share with us a little bit about how the yoga practice, the connection to your body, understanding that there was healing that needed to happen, that you got sicker before you got better. What did that look like?
Wow, that's a fascinating question. So, and it's interesting because in hindsight, I started with my yoga practice, my yoga training, right when I was diagnosed with cervical precancer,
Mm,
which is apparently really common, but the way it developed for me was a matter of 6 months. And it was really aggressive, and I had to, like I had to have some medical procedures and whatnot, and that's what kind of like triggered all the memories because everything was so invasive. And it
Mm.
really, at some point, I remember I was going through the yoga training and there were poses or that we had to do in the different parts of the training that I, just like you, I would either cry, like bawling without even knowing where that's coming from, or just get really, really angry. So the poses, the physical poses, were triggering really intense emotion in me. And I was like, what is happening? Like, I don't know what's going on. And then, they start explaining that, well, I think somebody mentioned to me the work of I can't pronounce his last name, but he wrote The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes because that book has come up for me like 6 times in the last 3 months. So it's something I need to read, apparently. Yeah.
It's not a light read,
Yeah.
just FYI, but it's fascinating how it explains not only what happens in your brain when you go through trauma and what happens in your body. So it was, to me, obviously, it's always the sum of experiences or events that lead to a point of crisis. But to me, it was not lost that the crisis started with a precancer, a cervical precancer. It was not serendipitous. Like, I really needed to reconnect with that part of myself because of the trauma.
Mm.
So I was already hooked into the creativity jam because that was around the time where Elizabeth Gilbert published Big Magic. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh my God, this is my thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I look for a therapist that would not only be able to deal with my type of trauma, but that was also a dance movement therapist and an art therapist. And she helped me put the pieces together through my art. And that's how also then my project was born, The Little Raging Warrior. And it was just, again, this idea of creating a space for me to process what I didn't have words for.
Mm.
And the dance movement therapy allowed me to use my yoga poses, my yoga practice to, okay, if I'm feeling angry, like, what do I do? Like, where does it feel? And what do I need to look for to be able to release that tension? And it's been fascinating and life-changing.
Mm-hmm. And how long ago was that? Like, are you still doing this, or is it sort of like, okay, I've processed this and now I can take myself to the next level?
So yes, like I have already, like, the trauma part, it's something that I have already processed, but I've created this place where I can really just anything around me. Like, I'm a highly sensitive person.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that's happening around me, if I don't pay attention too much, it will impact me in a way. So
Mm-hmm.
I now have art and movement to process that. So basically, it's become like my yoga practice, like being able to create something every day, or being able to put time into the images that come in my head, explain, kind of like to explain or process what's happening around me. It's just it's just good for me. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
a really good way to navigate the day to day and to cultivate joy, which to me is one of the, like, I realized at some point that living with depression and anxiety had really taken a toll in my capacity to feel joy.
Mm-hmm.
And art and movement really nourish me. So that's kind of how everything has come together. And at this point, I just use art to whatever I'm feeling or whatever I want to go, or dreams or insights, I just put them on a paper, because for me it always comes first as an image, and then the words come. Like, once I put the image on paper or I build the sculpture or whatever, it's later on that the words and the insight comes in, but first it's just an image. So that's how I do it right now, and it just helps me.
Mm-hmm. So much of this resonates with me because I would also say I identify as a highly sensitive person, and I didn't know that about myself until just a couple years ago. And boy, did that unlock a lot. And yeah, and but I think the other thing that you talked about was cultivating that inner observer, how the yoga practice allowed you to go inside, and then understand, why am I getting worked up here? Why is my breathing shallow? But then the tools of art and movement to help understand now how to process it through so it doesn't get clogged up and stuck, and to where now we're showing physical ailments, sicknesses, and it's robbing our joy. So, yeah. So one thing you also talked about, you mentioned, was the Little Raging Warrior Project. And, you mentioned, I read on your website that came to you through an EMDR session. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what EMDR is and how that came to you through that process?
Yes, absolutely. And we're probably going to have to search the full meaning of EMDR because I never remember the whole the whole acronym. But EMDR is a technique it's a technique that some therapists and psychologists use. It's based out on eye movement. I think it's eye movement. No,
I
I
don't
can't remember.
care. I don't
It's
care. I
okay,
want to
but
know what it means to you. Well, we can
yeah,
look it up.
yes. So basically, what I like the way it works is they use this technique to process intent, to reprocess trauma or moments that you are stuck with. And it's really gentle. You don't really have to relieve the trauma. They just walk you through. The therapist will first create what my therapist calls the container, which is getting to know you, understanding that there is a space to process things and there is a space to be safe, to put those memories or emotions in kind of like in this container, in this box, and then you little by little you take them out and you take care of them through this EMDR process, which is eye movement.
Mm-hmm.
And the way it works is the therapist will start coaching you to evoke the emotion. And then as you start describing what happens, then she helps you, okay, then focus on this. And then it kind of teaches you to navigate the emotion, and it brings you to a place where you understand what happened and that you don't need to be stuck there anymore. It's, to me, it's practically magic.
Yeah.
But it's life-changing.
Mm-hmm.
It really helped me get rid of the flashbacks, and it has really helped me in moving forward when I go through intense emotion that I can't, let go of.
It reminds me a little bit of, have you ever heard of tapping?
Yes.
Reminds me a little bit of that. Yeah. Yeah. I have done that, and the same thing of that, evoking the emotion. And then it's almost like with the EMDR, it's a rewiring through the eye movement. And I think the tapping is also almost like a rewiring through I don't know. It makes me curious. I'm not sure.
I think you nailed it. It's the untangling of the emotion that you haven't been able to process. As I told you before, to me, images come first than words. Especially when there are these intense emotions that I need to process. And in the first or the second session, the first image that came to my mind was this little girl, with a red dress, and obviously the little girl is me. And I connected with her. And then when you go through trauma, especially if it's sexual trauma, there's a lot of anger and rage involved. So at some point, I was talking to my therapist, like, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. And this was during an EMDR session. And then she started talking to me. And then this really strong guy pops into my head. It's kind of like, it's going to be funny, but it's kind of like The Rock, like kind of like Dwayne The Rock Johnson kind of personality, like he's really warm, but he's like big and scary. So this image pops up and I call it the rage, and he would take care of me, and everything that I wanted to, just rage about, he would do it in my mind. And then I think 2 or 3 sessions later, it's this warrior that shows up, this like Japanese, because I'm obsessed with dragons. So it's like kind of like a ninja dressed woman warrior. that would come in and slay all the monsters that were in my head. And so I had the little girl, I had the rage, and I had the warrior. So at some point I'm like, there is something here. And a few months after, I decided to share all the illustrations and all the art of the process that I had done with my therapist. And that's why I call it the little raging warrior.
Oh, I love that.
And I'm also very petite, so it
Yeah.
works well.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So what does the Little Raging Warrior Project do now? Like it was your expression, your experience. Because I'd love to share with where people can find it, or sort of what are you doing with that?
Yes, absolutely. So the Little Raging Warrior right now, it's a project that I have on Instagram. I started it with 100-day kind of like format. I called it the 100 Days of Healing, and basically is sharing my experience on how yoga and creativity have helped me not only process trauma, but learn to navigate the life and life challenges in a way that I can feel joy. So it is through art and the insight that have come through the pieces that I make that have helped me heal and understand and gain the emotional vocabulary to just be able to, walk in life every day and be able to deal with it without having to be stuck. And I felt the need to share that. And little by little, it's just growing into a space where I share my experience, but I also give the opportunity to others to have the difficult conversations, to share their moments of struggle. And it's just, I'm kind of, I have it and it's growing, and I'm really interested to see what is it going to turn out to be. Because little by little, people just start identifying and connecting with the pieces and the work and the words that I use to describe them. So that's basically what it is.
Yeah. So it's just sort of, you're just going with the flow with it a little bit.
Yeah, it's sharing the healing through creativity and helping people. And this is why I connected with the stuff that you do. It's helping people to understand that we're all creative. This is not something that is reserved for a selected few. And creativity is available to all of us, is not finite, and it can be used for good.
Yeah. Amen. I know, Martha, you and I met a couple years ago. Actually, you mentioned Elizabeth Gilbert and Big Magic, and we got connected through an event that Elizabeth Gilbert and Martha Beck led. And I guess, can you share with me a little bit about what you got out of that experience, what you love about Big Magic, or, did things change for you after that, or?
Absolutely. And I think I'm still going through the ripple effect of going to that workshop. It was really powerful to be, I think we were like 600 of us, to be in the same room and listen to Martha Beck and Elizabeth Gilbert talk about creativity and the different tools they shared with us. It really clicked something in me. And actually, I launched the project Little Raging Warrior because of that workshop. Like, I gained the courage and the inspiration to really put this project out there. And I've also made some friendships that I still have today, that with similar people like me, like, you say you're highly sensitive, creative, you have like, there were so many of us there, that it was just beautiful to see that I'm not alone in my experience, that there are more people that feel the same way, and there is a benefit in sharing. So I think I'm still living the after effect of going through that, going to that event. And now, a few years later, we're having this conversation and we both were there.
Right. Yeah. For me, because I had read Big Magic and read other Elizabeth Gilbert books. I wasn't that familiar with Martha Beck, although since then I did read Diana herself, which I love. Yeah. I read it twice. The first time I zipped through it, and the second time I sort of like savored the deliciousness of it. But what I loved about Elizabeth Gilbert's part was in her book, she has the principles of creativity, or, the big sort of like resistances, perhaps. And then she had us write the letters, and the letters to our principal, which was granting us permission, or the letter to our imagination, or our inspiration. And so that was very transformative. And then sharing it with the woman sitting next to me, and the instant bonding. And I think, like you said, the number of relationships that were created due to the I don't know, the depth of interactivity, even with 600 women, it was really powerful for me as well.
Yeah, and that you mentioned, the letters, like that's a tool I still use today. Like it's because it's so powerful, and I share it with everyone that want to talk about this. I will share it with them because it's so powerful. Like last year during the pandemic, I did a few of those letters because, it was intense, especially here in the States with the political climate and the pandemic and whatnot. And if you're somebody who struggles with mental health or has anxiety, that is such a powerful tool because going back to our initial conversation, it really puts you in a place where you are the observer and you are curious about, okay, what am I feeling? And sometimes I don't know what the emotion is until I finish the letter. And sometimes I do know what the emotion is, but I don't know what it wants from me. So it's by doing that writing exercise that I'm like, oh, so this is what's happening. And it really helps, just like art therapy, it really helps put things that are stuck in your mind into a piece of paper, and again, observe it in a way that it's not judgmental or critical. And it allows you to really it takes a weight out of your shoulders. It's such a powerful tool.
Yeah, we get caught in loops. We start telling ourselves, and you started earlier in our conversation about that inner critic and the negative and the things we say to ourselves. And just for those of you listening that haven't read Big Magic, the concept is to take your fear, or maybe anxiety, or maybe, it could be sadness. For her, it was specifically the resistances that are holding you back from your creativity, but you could do it really with any big emotion or any big area, and you just address it. Like, dear fear, you know, I guess, how would you describe it, Martha? Because sometimes I say, I'll say things like, dear fear, reveal to me what you would have me know. Or, I do a lot with more positive emotions, but I guess, how would you describe it?
So, and you're pretty close to it too. Also the way I use it, and I use it for both. And I don't like to categorize emotions in good or bad, or positive or negative, because they're really just information about how the environment that we are in is affecting us. And they're all completely valid. There is not one that is better than the other. They're just a response for us to understand how the environment is affecting us.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Yeah. But there are very complex emotions like grief, like fear, anxiety, rage, that just because in our culture, there's no space to feel those things. And especially for women, and some for men as well, that writing down from a place of, for, like you said, fear, like it's not even dear fear, it's the fear talking to you. So it's more like, dear Martha, I am your fear, and I'm here to tell you. And it's, the things that come out, and I'm like, whoa. And it's because, again, you are stepping out of that entanglement in your head, and you're just allowing it to speak, because it's speaking to you. And interesting enough, I've done it with grief, which is really powerful, because the grieving process, it's very complex, and it doesn't have a timeline, or it doesn't, it's not something logical. It just comes to you, and you have to feel it, and that's it. But I've also done it with joy. And I think we did that with Elizabeth at the workshop, like, dear Martha, I am your joy, and I'm here to tell you, and I learn so much about the things that really bring me joy that I had not been conscious about. So one of those, like the little things that bring me joy, for example, like it's the first sip of coffee in the morning. And after that letter, like I relish that first sip of coffee in the morning, and it really changes your day.
Yeah.
Because you have all these little things that bring you joy that you can count on no matter what happens. And it's not the big job, it's not the big goals that we have that may or may not happen, or it may take longer for us to accomplish. But there are little things that really are nurturing, that once you bring it into your awareness, it's magical.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and thank you for that, for clarifying that there are no negative emotions, that they're all there, valid, important, offering us, but some have sort of a negative connotation, or we, particularly as women, feel shame around feeling certain emotions. So thank you for naming that. Yeah. It's like my daughter, we're doing this diet reset, where it's not a detox, it's not a diet, but it's this sort of reclaiming our good eating, habits. And she's so funny because she's 18, and she's teaching me, she's reading and researching and learning about her own relationship with food. And
that's beautiful.
I know. And she said to me, Mom, there are no bad foods, which I know that, but I can say that as a parent, that's not good for you. That's junk. And it's very helpful when your children remind you and teach you. And for me personally, I would get in just habits of things that I wasn't even realize I was doing. And so, so we're rewriting our description of foods. They're not bad. They're just different choices.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me a couple questions that I would love to ask about sort of where you're going forward. You are still an architect. Is the Raging Warrior Project something that you are building a business out of? Is it a passion project? How does creativity fit into your life beyond architecture?
Great question. Because when I discovered, when I came into the Little Raging Warrior and creativity and yoga, I had a little bit of a life crisis, in the sense of, like, if these are all the things that I like, then I should, the typical, I should quit everything and pack my bags and go to Bali, eat, pray, love. Again, Elizabeth Gilbert, thank you.
Right.
And actually in that workshop, she mentioned curiosity, and she mentioned that you don't have to do that. You don't have to give up everything to change your life. You just have to know what brings you joy. And the way it has worked out for me is, again, everything I do is informed by my training as an architect, and I really enjoy architecture. So, but I had this conflict between yoga and corporate world, and how do I deal with that? And it took me a few years, and I took a year and a half off of work. I had the opportunity to do that when we moved here to Jacksonville, and to just create and take some time off and see what comes out. And interesting enough, a year and a half later, I go back to the corporate world as an architect, but now I'm not only informed by architecture, I'm informed by my creative journey, and I'm informed by my yoga journey. So the way it's showing up is, I am in this corporate world and I am in this company that little by little I'm impacting by the things that I've learned. Like, I've given creativity workshops in a company that it's basically mostly engineering. So there's a lot of men and there's a lot of like engineering and whatnot, but I give yoga classes, a monthly yoga class. During the pandemic, we have a women's network group. I gave the workshops in English and in Spanish for creativity. I bring my art to my cubicle. Like I talk to people about the things that I love. And I'm in the innovation department now, and I'm bringing people in from all walks of life to talk about innovation, which is a different word for creativity. So little by little, I'm basically infiltrating the corporate world with all I've learned in this journey, and I think that's my purpose. Like I that's to me, in the larger scheme of things, there is such an inertia in the corporate world that if you're able to impact that from the inside, wonderful things can happen.
Yeah, that is
So,
so cool.
because I didn't want to renounce any of this. Like I
Mm-hmm.
want to be an architect, and I want to be creative, and I want to be a yogi. So as a good architect, I've created a space for this to happen. So I'm all of them every day. And I go to work and I'm an architect, and then I have a conversation and it's the creative part of me. And then I give a yoga class and it's the yogi in me. So it's learning that you don't necessarily have to renounce everything to build a new life, but you can also look at what you have and make a space for that to happen. And that allows for you to be genuine and allows for you to be courageous and vulnerable in showing yourself as you are, no matter the environment you're in.
Yeah. So, Martha, first of all, congratulations. I mean, so many women